There's a voice inside your head that doesn't sound like criticism. It sounds like truth. It doesn't say you made a mistake, it says you are a mistake. This isn't just negative self-talk. This is shame, and it's fundamentally different from every other emotion you experience. While fear warns you of danger and guilt signals you violated your values, shame attacks something deeper: your right to exist as you are. And here's what makes it so insidious. Shame doesn't just make you feel bad about yourself. It makes you feel bad about feeling bad. It creates a recursive loop of self-rejection that becomes the lens through which you interpret your entire life. Today we're going to dismantle the architecture of shame, how it's built, how it operates, and most importantly, how to escape it. Let's start with what shame actually is. Neuroscientific research using fMRI scans reveals that shame and guilt activate different neural pathways. A 2014 study published in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience found that shame primarily activates the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, brain regions associated with pain processing and self-referential thinking. Guilt, by contrast, activates the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for moral reasoning and problem-solving. Here's what this means. Guilt says, I did something bad. It's behavioral, fixable, and action-oriented. Your brain treats it as a problem to solve. Shame says, I am bad. It's identity-based, global, and paralyzing. Your brain treats it as a threat to your core self. Guilt creates discomfort about actions. Shame creates disgust about existence. Researcher June Tangney's work demonstrates that guilt is actually adaptive. It motivates repair and change. Shame, however, correlates with depression, anxiety, addiction, aggression, and suicide. One moves you forward, the other freezes you in place. Shame doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's installed. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson identified that children between ages 1 to 3 navigate what he called the autonomy versus shame and doubt stage. This is when we're learning to do things independently, to walk, to feed ourselves, to control our bodies. When caregivers respond to our inevitable failures with patience and encouragement, we develop autonomy. When they respond with disgust, disappointment, or humiliation, we develop shame. But here's the crucial part. A child's brain cannot yet distinguish between my behavior is unacceptable and I am unacceptable. They lack the cognitive development for that nuance. So when a parent says, "What's wrong with you?" instead of "that behavior isn't okay," when they withdraw love instead of correcting action, the child doesn't just feel bad about what they did. They internalize that something is fundamentally wrong with who they are. Psychologist Donald Nathanson describes shame as occurring when the bridge between the child and caregiver is broken. The child reaches for connection and encounters rejection. And because children are completely dependent on their caregivers for survival, this rejection feels like annihilation. The child learns, my authentic self is dangerous. My needs are too much. My existence is conditional. John Bradshaw, in his seminal work, Healing the Shame That Binds You, introduced the concept of toxic shame, shame that becomes identity. This is when shame stops being a feeling you have and becomes who you think you are. Bradshaw writes, toxic shame is experienced as the all-pervasive sense that I am flawed and defective as a human being. This creates what he calls a shame bind, a double bind where you feel ashamed of yourself. You feel ashamed of feeling ashamed. You must hide both the original shame and the shame about having shame. It's a recursive trap. You can't expose the shame because exposing it would create more shame. So you build elaborate defense mechanisms: perfectionism, people-pleasing, aggression, addiction, achievement, or withdrawal. These aren't character flaws. They're survival strategies developed by a psyche trying to manage an unbearable internal state. When shame is triggered, your nervous system doesn't distinguish it from a physical threat. Research by Paul Gilbert on the psychobiology of shame shows that shame activates the threat defense system. the same system that responds to predators. Your amygdala fires, cortisol floods your system, and you enter a state of what he calls involuntary subordination. Your body literally curls inward. Your eyes look down, your voice gets smaller, you make yourself physically smaller. An evolutionary response designed to appease a more dominant member of your social group. But here's the problem. In toxic shame, there's no external threat. The threat is internal. You're both the attacker and the attacked. Your own mind becomes the predator. And because the threat never goes away, you remain in a chronic state of threat activation. This is why shame correlates so strongly with anxiety, depression, and trauma symptoms. Your nervous system is essentially saying, I am in danger from myself. Shame evolved as a social emotion, a way to maintain group cohesion and enforce norms. In small hunter-gatherer societies, social exclusion meant death. Shame was the internal mechanism that kept you from violating tribal rules. But in modern society, shame has been weaponized. Institutions, family systems, religions, educational systems, cultures use shame as a control mechanism. They implant it deliberately to enforce conformity. Don't be selfish. Who do you think you are? You should be ashamed of yourself. What will people think? These aren't just statements. They're shame installations, programs that run automatically once internalized. The brilliant part, from a social control perspective, is that once shame is internalized, you don't need external enforcement anymore. You police yourself. You become your own surveillance system. You don't express that desire because you've learned desire itself is shameful. You don't pursue that dream because you've learned ambition is arrogant. You don't set that boundary because you've learned your needs are burdensome. The cage is inside you. Shame creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The trigger. Something happens that activates your shame. A mistake, a rejection, a moment of visibility. The interpretation. Instead of seeing it as an isolated event, your shame-based identity interprets it as confirmation of your unworthiness. The withdrawal. You pull away from connection because shame tells you that you must hide. The isolation. Isolation prevents you from receiving contradictory evidence, from experiencing acceptance despite your flaws. The reinforcement. The lack of connection confirms your shame-based belief that you're unworthy of connection. Researcher Brené Brown's work on shame resilience identifies this as the fundamental paradox. Shame thrives in secrecy, silence, and judgment. Yet, the antidote to shame is precisely what shame prevents: connection, vulnerability, and empathy. You can't heal shame in isolation because isolation is shame's breeding ground. That voice in your head, the one that tells you you're not good enough, smart enough, attractive enough, isn't actually you. It's the internalized voice of every shaming message you've ever received. Psychologist Richard Schwartz, in his internal family systems model, calls this the inner critic, a part of your psyche that took on the job of shaming you before anyone else could. The logic is perverse, but understandable. If I shame myself first, maybe I can prevent the more devastating shame of being shamed by others. If I reject myself first, maybe I can avoid the pain of being rejected. The inner critic becomes a protective mechanism, one that causes the very pain it's trying to prevent. And because it's internalized, it has access to your most vulnerable thoughts, your deepest fears, your most private moments. It knows exactly where to strike. So how do you escape? Step 1. Develop shame awareness. You can't change what you can't see. Start recognizing shame when it appears. Physical sensations: chest tightness, face flushing, gaze averted, body contracting. Thought patterns: I'm so stupid. What's wrong with me? I'm not enough. Behavioral responses: hiding, lashing out, perfectionism, people-pleasing, numbing. Simply naming shame, saying, "I'm feeling shame right now," begins to create separation between you and the emotion. Step 2. Differentiate shame from guilt. When you notice self-criticism, ask, "Am I critiquing my behavior or my being? I made a mistake" versus "I am a mistake. I said something hurtful" versus "I'm a terrible person." This distinction isn't semantic, it's neurological. It shifts you from the shame processing regions of your brain to the problem solving regions. Step 3. Talk about it. This is the hardest part and the most essential. Shame cannot survive being spoken in an atmosphere of empathy. Brown's research found that people with high shame resilience have one thing in common: they reach out, they tell someone. They refuse to let shame fester in secrecy. Find someone who has earned the right to hear your story, someone who can sit with you without fixing, judging, or minimizing. The moment you say, "I feel ashamed," and someone responds with, "You're not alone," shame begins to lose its power. Step 4. Practice self-compassion. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion shows it's more effective than self-esteem for psychological well-being. Self-esteem is contingent. It depends on success. Self-compassion is unconditional. It has 3 components: self-kindness instead of self-judgment, common humanity instead of isolation, "I'm not the only one who struggles," mindfulness instead of over-identification, "I'm having a shameful thought," not "I am shameful." When shame arises, place your hand on your heart and say, "This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of being human. May I be kind to myself." Step 5. Rewrite the narrative. Shame keeps you locked in a story about who you are. But that story isn't fact, it's interpretation. Begin questioning the narrative. Where did I learn this about myself? Whose voice am I hearing? Is this actually true, or is this shame talking? Then practice offering yourself a different story, one based on reality, not on shame-distorted perception. Here's the ultimate truth about shame. It promises you that if you're perfect enough, you'll finally be acceptable. But perfection is impossible, so shame always has ammunition. The way out isn't to become perfect. It's to accept being imperfect, to show up as you are, flawed, uncertain, messy, human, and refuse to abandon yourself. Shame says, "Hide what's broken, and maybe you'll be loved." Courage says, "Show what's broken and discover you're already worthy." Every time you've hidden who you really are, every time you've dimmed your light, swallowed your truth, or made yourself smaller to avoid judgment, shame won. Not because you're weak, but because shame is powerful. It's been developing its strategies since childhood. It knows your vulnerabilities because it was created by your vulnerabilities. But you are not your shame. Shame is a feeling, a learned response, a neural pathway worn deep by repetition. And what's been learned can be unlearned. What's been constructed can be dismantled. The person you've been hiding, the desires you've been suppressing, the life you've been too ashamed to claim, they're still there, waiting. Not in some distant future where you've finally fixed yourself. Right now, as you are. Shame wants you to believe you're alone in your unworthiness, that your flaws are uniquely disqualifying, that everyone else has it figured out, and you're the only one pretending. But that's the final lie shame tells. Everyone carries shame. Everyone has a story they're afraid to tell. Everyone has a part of themselves they've learned to hide. Your shame isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're human. And the moment you stop letting it define you is the moment you start living. If this resonated with you, you're not alone. Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is witness each other's truth. Subscribe for more psychology content that explores what it means to be human. Remember, you are not what happened to you. You are not what you were told about yourself. You are not your shame. You are the awareness that can see it, understand it, and finally release it.